I have asked you all to come here today to address the singular issue of returning nationals of Trinidad and Tobago from the war-torn conflict zones, and in particular the ISIS zones, the caliphate zones, where they have been badly affected by war and terrorist acts over the past few years, and in particular Iraq and Syria. As you all are all aware, these are two jurisdictions, two countries that have been through some very atrocious crimes and acts of terrorism and war zones over the past few years, and in particular the rise of ISIS, and now it appears the demise, but not the final demise of ISIS. As you all are aware, unfortunately, we have had a number of nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, in particular during the years of 2012, 2013, and 2014, going abroad to some of these zones, these conflict zones, to join ISIS and to fight alongside on the whole ISIS ideology. You've heard varying numbers and some ridiculous numbers by some members of the opposition and in particular parliamentarians. The clearest number that we have been able to ascertain is about 130 of our nationals, and out of that 130 there were a vast number of women and children who accompanied the adult males to go out during those years of 2012 to 2014 to these conflict zones. It should come as no surprise to you, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, that over the last couple of years we have had persons returning from these areas. We've also had some persons who've unsuccessfully attempted to get out to Syria and Iraq, some of our nationals, over the last few years. And the various authorities in neighboring countries such as Turkey and other countries have picked up our nationals and have in fact deported and repatriated them home. So sometime in 2017, in 2018, we've had on a number of occasions some of our citizens return from these zones. So the first point I'd like to make is that this is not, because what I've come here today, there seems to be a lot of media attention to two of our nationals, two minor nationals, two young boys, Ayud Abdul Kadir Ferreira and Mahmoud Abdul Wahid Ferreira, the Ferreira brothers, and their imminent return to Trinidad and Tobago. So the first point I'd like to make to you all is that we here at National Security, and as the government, and more particularly the various arms of law enforcement, intelligence, as well as other social agencies, this is not the first time that we're dealing with a situation such as this. In fact, in this very room, unbeknown to the population, I think it was 2 years ago, I sat down along with our law enforcement agencies, our intelligence agencies, and met and thanked Turkish authorities who had escorted, I think it was 9 or 13 of our nationals, women and children, with a few adult males, back to Trinidad and Tobago, who had been held attempting to cross into the Syrian border, and some who had crossed over from the Syrian border back into Turkey. And the Turkish authorities had made contact with us, and they had repatriated them here. We received them. So it's not the first time that we're dealing with a situation such as this, but it's the first time that there were two unaccompanied minors. The next point I'd like to make is you all would recognize that these war zones and these conflict zones are very far from Trinidad and Tobago. We have no embassies, no consulates. We have no physical points of contact in Syria and Iraq. And when it has come to ISIS and other terrorist-related items, we rely, as a government and as a country, very, very heavily on our foreign allies, and in particular on the United States, the United Kingdom, and some of our other allies, for example, Canada, Australia, depending on the circumstances. What I can tell you is when we came in as an administration, the relationships with a lot of the bodies, and in particular the intelligence and law enforcement bodies of these jurisdictions I've just named, were very strained. And there was a real problem we met that they did not know who to trust in the room and who to provide information to. The Honorable Prime Minister at that time mandated a few of his cabinet members to go about the active rebuilding of these relationships. So I personally have been to Washington, D.C. on a number of occasions, ensuring that we reopen the channels of communication with the U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies. So I have physically been to Washington on a number of occasions, and I'm happy to report to the population of Trinidad and Tobago that under this administration, there is once again a free flow of information with our U.S. allies. Similarly, I have been to the United Kingdom. In fact, last week, I was in the United Kingdom with the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Defense Staff, and one of our tasks on that was the continuing relationship building exercise. And we held a number of meetings with the intelligence services, with the police agency that is charged with dealing with terrorism in the United Kingdom, SO15, and we met with other intelligence services and bodies, as well as the Home Office and the Minister in charge of the Commonwealth and the United Nations, etc. And part of that was to ensure the continued provision of intelligence, because when allegations are made that we have Trinidad and Tobago nationals in these far-off places, such as Syria and Iraq, we depend very heavily on the foreign intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies in assisting us in a verification exercise. And even those countries with massive resources, such as the United States and United Kingdom, sometimes face difficulty in being able to verify the veracity of information, and in particular when it comes down to individuals. So for example, when you hear about foreign terrorist fighters who may be nationals of Trinidad and Tobago dying out in the battlefields, very often it is difficult unless the US authorities or the British authorities or other allied authorities are able, through their forces on the ground, to verify this for us, for it to be verified. We've had a particular individual who became a poster boy for ISIS, and on numerous occasions there were suggestions that he died out there. As at this time, it is still unconfirmed, and I have asked those specific questions on my trips to both London and Washington, D.C. So the point why I give you all of this contextual background is for you to understand that it is not an easy exercise, nor does Trinidad and Tobago have the resources to ourselves verify what is going on in Syria and in Iraq. In fact, last week Thursday, when I had meetings with the intelligence services in the United Kingdom, I asked them very specific questions about some of the things that we're seeing in international media and how it would affect persons fleeing these conflict zones, etc. And they admitted that at this stage it is quite difficult to provide specific information and particulars of the individuals that we were asking about. However, the good news is that the relationship with our foreign allies is as strong as ever. I think it is better than it has been in a very long time. And the free flow of information from their intelligence services to our intelligence services and law enforcement agencies is taking place once again. So now to get to this particular instance. In August of last year, in July of last year in particular, the International Red Cross came to the government of Trinidad and Tobago and said, look, they believe that there are a number of nationals at refugee camps in both Syria and Iraq, and they would like to assist us with the process of repatriation. As you would understand, or you should understand, the issue of repatriation of persons from these conflict zones is not a simple one. It is quite a complex one. First of all, you have to verify that in fact the persons who are claiming to be nationals are nationals. There have also been certain persons who have been born allegedly to Trinidadian parents, so they're not, as of birth, nationals of Trinidad and Tobago. So there's no record of them in Trinidad and Tobago, being born in Trinidad and Tobago. Rather, it is through their parental lines and the allegations of them being born to Trinidadian parents that there is some connection with Trinidad. So the first thing you have to do is you have to verify the information. And that's why I took some time to explain that Trinidad does not have the resources. We don't have boots on the ground, as we say, in these conflict zones or even in nearby places to do that verification exercise. So we've been trying to build, and I am happy to report that we have made a lot of progress in building our relationship with the Turkish authorities. We now have a Turkish ambassador based there in Trinidad and Tobago for the first time under this administration. And again, that is not by VAPs, that is not because they like Trinidad and Tobago, etc. It's due to the hard work we've been doing, and in particular through the Ministry of National Security, in ensuring that we have open channels and lines of communication with Turkey, because it borders Syria and has become very, very important in the global perspective. So when the International Red Cross came and said, look, there are these two young boys, the Ferreira brothers, who they believe they were in a refugee camp, Roj, in Syria, and they wanted our assistance in dealing with it. Immediately I set about establishing, as you all would have seen from a statement that was issued yesterday, a multidisciplinary, multi-agency team that we dubbed Team Nightingale, the Nightingale team, that has a number of the various organizations that are important in the circumstances, the FIU, the Terrorist Interdiction Unit, which is a special branch unit, the FIB, the Financial Investigations Branch, which is part of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Child Protection Unit out of the TTPS, the Anti-Terrorism Desk from the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, the Children's Authority, Counter-Trafficking Unit, the AML CFT Compliance Unit from the Ministry of National Security, our intelligence services. You would have immediately picked up that we have both the Children's Authority as well as the Child Protection Unit. And that is what we set about. I established this body because I don't expect this to be the first, well, this is the first case of two children being repatriated in these circumstances. I don't expect it to be the last. When you're doing these types of operations, you need to ensure that you have proper policies and procedures in place. We need to ensure that we are ready to be able to assess these children. We tried to make arrangements to get our own personnel out of these camps in Syria. We had even asked for the assistance in being able to video conference these boys and to do all we could from here in Trinidad and Tobago to do the verification exercise. Unfortunately, we weren't able to carry out a lot of those exercises because quite simply we weren't provided with the resources over on the Syrian side to make the contact that we wanted so desperately to make. You would appreciate, members of the media and members of the public, in these types of situations, they're very, very sensitive, and of course they're involving issues of national security. So it is not something, whilst it's ongoing, that the government would come out and talk about and what it is taking place. At the end of the day, these are conflict zones. They're war zones, in fact. We're very dangerous terrorist cells and persons who were trained to kill in terrorist activities learn their tradecraft. So we have to be extremely cautious as we go about doing and performing our duties in these areas. And that, by definition, means that there's very little information we can share whilst investigations and verification processes are taking place. And that is what has been taking place since August of last year. You would have also noticed in this particular case, in the statement yesterday, I used the language that there was an unenthusiastic approach or an unenthusiastic response to the approach by our Trinidad and Tobago law enforcement when the mother of these two young boys was contacted. That language was chosen very, very carefully, and it is reflective and 100% accurate of what we faced. We were able to find absolutely no police record of any report being made in 2014 to today's date of these children being abducted by their father. When we began the conversation at the outset of the investigations as to would you be prepared to take the children back, would you be able, and of course one of the things we're then doing as well is having the Children's Authority and the Child Protection Unit do an assessment of the home environment. Because if the children are to return, we have to ensure at this level that they return to a safe environment, understanding the trauma that they would have faced out in war zones. We in Trinidad and Tobago are very lucky citizens. We do not know, nor can many of us comprehend what it is like and what happens in these war zones and what it is persons who have been exposed in these war zones would have faced. It is our duty as the authorities to make sure that we can provide a safe environment for the return of any children. Also to do an assessment exercise. When we approached the mother, there was a very unenthusiastic response. The mother is remarried, etc. I don't want to get into too much of her personal life, but we found that there did not seem to be any level of anxiety or any level of wanting to get the children back in a hurry. Of course, that all has subsequently changed as soon as the media got onto it, and I guess I could understand. So it is completely wrong to say that the government was not doing anything. We were carrying out very complex investigations, especially in light of what I've just explained to you and the distance from which these children are, and despite us trying to make all attempts to connect with the children, we were unable to do so. As we are all aware, the children have now been taken. It appears from, I'm reading the same media reports you're reading, and in fact, as I sat with the British intelligence agencies and law enforcement last week and was asking them the question last week, they too were unable to verify. But if I'm to believe what I read in the media, and in particular some of the international media that are being channeled or pushed by not a local reporter, but a reporter from the region who took a particular personal interest into this story and with respect to these two children. They have now been picked up from the refugee camp in Syria by their mother, and they are on their way home. We have systems in place for their return. I have just come from a meeting with Team Nightingale, where everything is being prepared initially upon these children's return to Trinidad and Tobago, which may very well be tomorrow. An assessment of the children will be done. We will ask for that assessment to be done consensually. I have instructed today that we go to court to seek an order. I don't want to speak about it because I don't want to prejudice the court hearing, but I want you, the citizens, to know that the government and the authorities are doing everything within their power to act responsibly to ensure that these children are assessed immediately upon their return. If it can't be immediate, because we understand it's been a long journey and there would have been a lot of trauma, that they can be assessed in the shortest possible time frame to understand where they are, because ultimately we would like them to return to a normal way of life. Another process that has been taking place over the period since August to now is our Children's Authority and Child Protection Unit have done an assessment of the home environment to ensure that they can be looked after, etc. We are also tomorrow going to hold out to the family that any assistance that may be needed, including psychological assistance, as best as we can provide, to please keep in contact with us, because we are concerned about the welfare of these two young boys and their reintegration into Trinidad and Tobago society. Which leads to this point. All of you members of the media would be aware that when it comes to dealing with children, we have a responsibility to respect and furthermore to protect their privacy. So I am very disappointed to see that that has not happened in the current circumstances. In fact, when you look at international media reports, very often with children, they blacken out their faces so you can't see their identity. There is a reason for that. It is for the protection of the children. They have their lives ahead of them. The prejudice that they can face by their identities being cast all over is so exponential, and it could be a very negative thing for them. So I find it quite ironic that in this particular instance, the same person, because he was messaging me a number of times a day, and you also have to understand when it comes to certain matters of national security, I am not going to respond to your inquiries, because to do so would be a breach of national security, and there's certain information I cannot provide at certain points in time. As I ended the statement yesterday saying, as soon as we can provide information, we will. For example, today with this press conference, yesterday the timing of the statement. Prior to that, we could not because of the ongoing investigations and verification process. The point I was coming to is you have to protect the identity of children. And the same journalist who claimed that he was so concerned about these young boys and he took it on as a personal exercise and he took it on personally, etc. It would have been a good idea not to publish the full and explicit photographs of the faces of these children. And I'm pleading to you now, the members of the media going forward, because these children will arrive back on our shores. Please respect their privacy. And not only respect the privacy of these young children, take your duty further, as is required in some jurisdictions by legislation, and protect the privacy of these young boys. Because part of what we now owe them and the responsibility we now have is to reintegrate them as best as is possible back into society. And by publishing their photographs as clearly as is being done and has been done, it has done the exact opposite. Because when they now have to be reintegrated, you do not know what are the traumas and turmoil that they will face going forward. So that's just my word of caution. Let us be careful. We can't change the past, but let us be careful now going forward, how we deal with children. The last point I'd like to make is you can rest assured that Team Nightingale is very committed to the cause and has as its key mantra and watchwords going forward the welfare, protecting the welfare of in particular minors. But, and there is a but, this always has to be balanced, and in particular with older children and adults who may return to our shores from these zones. It always has to be balanced with national security and the protection of the public interest. I'll tell you all, last week, when I was in the United Kingdom, I walked across Westminster Bridge. You all would recall that last year, there were two particular terrorist attacks at the House of Parliament. One where a gentleman drove a van and plowed into the crowd on Westminster Bridge and then pulled up at Parliament and actually killed a police officer at the Parliament before he was shot and killed by the armed police. Walking across that bridge a few days ago and seeing the concrete barriers they've now put so no vehicles can run off brought home the point for me as an individual. We here in Trinidad and Tobago should not take any matters that are related to terrorism and the potential of ISIS sympathizers, this is on a different point now, lightly. And you have to trust the Ministry of National Security and in particular intelligence services or law enforcement agencies when we say that we're working on something. I can tell you as a Minister of National Security and as a member of the National Security Council and as one of the persons interfacing with all of these international intelligence agencies, when I went with the Prime Minister to Chogam last year, I broke off and went to meetings with these British intelligence agencies and other law enforcement agencies. In Australia, on the working visit with the Prime Minister, the same thing. And as I said, to Washington, D.C. up to a few weeks ago, at their State Department having conversations with respect to counterterrorism. We are privy to a lot of information that the public will not be privy to. And this happens all over the world when you sit in these seats of responsibility. So trust us and understand that we're always doing the balancing exercise to protect you, the members of the public. That's our first and foremost, I see it as the first and foremost role and responsibility of myself and those who I work with in these instances. And then secondly, to balance the welfare of those persons who've been in these zones, etc. At some stage, we will face, unfortunately, the issue of dealing with foreign terrorist fighters. There's the potential for that, foreign terrorist fighters who are nationals of Trinidad and Tobago returning to Trinidad and Tobago. That, of course, poses a whole different spectrum of issues, etc. The point, or one of the points that I'd like to make here this afternoon is to let you, the members of the public, know through you, the members of the media, that the government and law enforcement and the Children's Authority, Child Protection Units, and all of the other units I've just listed, and some others that I haven't, have been working, and we have been putting things in place constantly doing the analysis, constantly doing the investigations, etc. The last point I'd like to make is anyone returning, including minors, from these zones where they could have been exposed to some of the ills of those zones will be monitored. All of these persons will be monitored by law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago. And the simple reason for that is to ensure the protection of the public interest and to ensure the protection of the other citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I'd like to thank you all very much for your time here this afternoon. I think at this stage, that's all I'd like to say. I'd like to end by just reminding you, the members of the media, please help us to protect the identities and to protect these young children who return to Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you. I'll take a few questions.
You talk about all of this has been Minister Young from TV6. You talk about the government has been doing things, and it's not wrong to say that it hasn't, but it appeared as though as soon as Mr. Roger Waters of the band Pink Floyd got involved, things seemed to be moving a lot faster. Almost as soon as he got involved, then he found this mother, the mother's taken to Syria. Is it that he has better connections than the government of the country? How is it that once he got involved, things seem to move much faster?
There's a massive difference. He has no responsibility. He's not responsible for your safety and well-being. He's not responsible for anything to do with Trinidad and Tobago. What he did is he used his private resources to send a private jet, as far as I could see, and to send resources to get the mother to Syria. As I've just taken the time to outline, we, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we have no private resources like that. We can't send a plane. In fact, to draw an analogy, one of the difficulties we face is in our immigration detention center, and to be able to deport illegal immigrants from Trinidad and Tobago back. We simply don't have those types of resources. So what he was able to do using his personal resources, kudos for him, but he certainly does not have the type of responsibility the government of Trinidad and Tobago does.
Now, who is paying for everybody to come back then? So who provided the passports that these children would obviously need? Who's paying for the flight back? Is he doing that, or is the government paying for all three of them to return?
The government is not paying for their repatriation.
So is he doing it?
I have no idea.
So, but you're...
What I can tell you, you asked, is the government paying? The answer is no, the government is not paying. I don't know if Ms. Ferreira raised her own personal finances. I don't know who is paying for their repatriation. That is a question that has to be directed to you. But I can tell you, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is not covering that cost.
How was the government able to provide expedited passports for these young boys?
Again, the government from this level didn't get involved. What I know is that an approach was made to immigration, documentation was provided, and they will utilize that documentation to come home.
And you said they might come as early as tomorrow. Is that confirmed? Because obviously you seem to be distancing yourself, but at the same time, if you're talking about getting a court order, monitoring and all that, you should know exactly when they're returning.
Well, one, I can tell you, having been through this process before, very often, because it's based on intelligence and it's based on foreign partners providing information. So we have gone through similar situations in the past where we believe somebody's coming home on a Tuesday, they don't get on a flight on a Tuesday, so we're then notified, well, they didn't come on that flight, they then arrive on a Thursday or the following week or 2 weeks after. So at this stage, our understanding is it may be tomorrow, but until someone gets on the plane and the plane takes off for Trinidad, I can't say with a degree of certainty. What we do is we prepare. So as soon as we know there is a possibility of a return on a specific date, we prepare for that date. Very often, as has happened in the past, we will prepare, they don't come, we then have to be prepared for the next occasion, and then finally when they come.
Can you give an idea of who will be there to meet them in the airport? You personally, a social worker, can you give us an idea of what that might look like?
The Children's Authority, the Child Protection Unit, the arms of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service who take responsibility for these types of situations. I have asked that we do all that we possibly can to get assistance from a psychological point of view. I can also tell you all in a conversation I had with our British allies this afternoon before I met with Team Nightingale, they offered and I accepted for them to send persons in the United Kingdom who have the expert training and who have had the expert experience of reintegrating persons like this, minors, back into the British system and society, to come to Trinidad and Tobago to share their experiences and to train persons at our Children Authority and the Child Protection Unit, etc. So I've told the British, please go ahead and put that in place this afternoon. Obviously, it wouldn't happen for this occasion.
Minister Young, Leo Soares from the Express. You stated that the Children's Authority and the Child Protection Unit will be at the airport tomorrow, but will the kids be taken into the care of the Children's Authority as soon as they arrive?
I have this afternoon given a specific instruction not to go for a court order, because it's open to us to go for a court order that the children be taken into the state's custody. What we're going to do is an assessment. I think these children have been through quite a lot of trauma, and I think if they are currently with their mother, let's leave it there. But we have a responsibility to do an assessment, to have the experts do an assessment, and let's wait the outcome of that report before any further decisions are taken. I have this afternoon as well given the instructions that at the end of the day, in addition to national security issues, the welfare of these boys and their future depends on the actions that we take, and that's to be borne in mind, and we're to assist as much as we possibly can with our resources.
Good day, Minister Rashad Khan from Guardian. I would just like to circle back to something you said there with illegal immigration. Now, with today, the opposition of Venezuela swearing himself in as the president of Venezuela, and Trump now saying that he is going to recognize him as a legitimate leader, there is a very real chance that there could be a little bit more instability within Venezuela and would result in a lot more illegal immigration into our country. Is anything going to be done to secure our borders?
As you should be quite aware, we have been working towards improving the security of our borders. In fact, I was just speaking to the acting chief immigration officer, telling him that that is higher up on my priority list and my agenda, and that we need to do more. I am happy to say that over the last, I would say, month and a half, maybe a bit more, the borders, knock on wood, have been a lot more secure. We've been stopping, there was it seemed as though quite a lot of influx via the coastline, etc. The Coast Guard had stepped up and have maintained their presence along strategic points. In speaking to both the Chief of Defense Staff as well as the Commissioner of Police, a lot more we've been doing is driven by intelligence. So in speaking in particular to the CDS over the last few days in the United Kingdom, we have agreed to utilize a lot more intelligence and do a lot more data analysis. So yes, I do expect our borders to become a lot more secure. I'm trying to get more interceptor units out. Cabinet, I did my part. Cabinet approved, I think, the rectification of 14 interceptor boats. That is going to tremendously assist in this exercise. So it's now just a push and get those things done. So yes, we have been doing a lot more. The Commissioner of Police has been giving a lot more instructions based on intelligence at patrols that should be done on certain coastline beaches that are easier illegal points of entry and access. So we are very aware of it. One of the things I've discussed with my colleague, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Minister Moses, who's also a minister in the Ministry of National Security, is I would like him to arrange, and he's agreed to do so, a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister in charge of National Security in Venezuela to meet with Minister Moses and myself in the shortest possible time for us to have more directed in particular conversations with them about border security and this immigration issue from a Trinidadian perspective.
A slightly more directed question. You're looking at the protests that are happening that seem to be backed by the U.S. government, the Venezuelan government calling it a coup. by all accounts, if this goes the way the U.S. wants it, the Minister of Foreign Affairs may not be the Minister of Foreign Affairs very soon. What is the government putting in place, especially now that we don't have a representative in Caracas? Where do our relations stand, especially as it is today, where there is what appears to be a US-backed coup against Venezuela?
You are using some very, very strong language. Unless
Appears
you are
to
in
be.
the intelligence services, you have information I don't have. As far as I'm aware, there is no coup taking place in Venezuela, and I think that's very irresponsible language to use. I too have seen I don't know if it's a tweet or if it's an official position from the United States president. That's his prerogative. He can say whatever he wants. At the end of the day, Venezuela, as far as I'm aware, remains a sovereign country. It is completely wrong to say that Trinidad and Tobago has no representative in Venezuela. That is 100% inaccurate. Trinidad and Tobago does not have an ambassador in Venezuela. We have a working embassy in Venezuela. It is not unusual not to have an ambassador. In fact, I will remind you that the United States did not have an ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago for many years under the Kamala Persad-Bissessar government. And in fact, even when we came in as an administration, it took a while for the United States of America to confirm Ambassador John Estrada under President Obama and to get an ambassador for the United States to Trinidad and Tobago. At that time, I didn't hear these types of questions taking place. Just for a little bit of education, we have a charge d'affaires, who is the highest public servant member of staff in an embassy. We have one in Caracas, and I have interacted with him on many occasions on my trips to Venezuela. And as I am aware, he's doing quite a good job. He has all of the right contacts in Venezuela. I certainly would not wish for any country to have a coup, as you put it.
The Venezuelan government is using those words, by the way.
Right, well, as I say, you have information I don't have. In fact, today I've had the Venezuelan government reach out to me on some other matters. At the end of the day, I think sovereign states should respect other sovereign states, and that remains Trinidad and Tobago's position. Our foreign policy is a very clear one of non-intervention. Obviously, we don't want to see any massive disruption taking place. As your fellow journalist, your colleague put it a short while ago, that has direct effects for Trinidad and Tobago. And we stand, as we've said throughout, as the Prime Minister has said, we stand ready to assist in whatever way we can, including in any mediatory position that we may be able to play. But we certainly don't think one government calling on another government to fall is the right way to go about it.
Can I get a name of the charge d'affaires in Venezuela?
If I remember, I think it's Dwayne Chinslick. He's a foreign affairs officer. Okay, that's any other questions?
Minister, I see Mr. Clive Stafford Smith, who's the human rights lawyer working alongside Mr. Waters. He has responded to your press release issued yesterday. He's saying that he finds it absolutely disgusting that the ministry would, say that the children's mother did not show any interest in having them returned. And he also described your release as also disgusting, and he's saying that the ministry should hang its head in shame. Have you any response to this?
I haven't seen what you refer to, but I take you on your word, and that's what he has said. That's very interesting language for a lawyer to use, and he certainly is not privy to the information that I am privy to, because he was not part of the process until very recently, and he should be cautioned to hold a little more on his tongue. Okay, thank you all very much.